Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Night Call by Brenden Carlson. Narrated by Heitsch. Technological progress has merely provided us with more efficient means for going backwards. Aldous Huxley. Chapter 1. A notorious woman, with whom I am well acquainted, once told me, "Always strike a man when he is down. Give him no reason to think that he may stand and reciprocate." As I lay on the asphalt, I considered myself lucky that no one was nearby, and luckier still that few people shared that principle. What should have been a simple drop down a garbage chute had ended badly. I'd been expecting to land in a pile of garbage. I didn't mind what was in the bag so long as it was soft, but instead, the curved handle of the trash bin had hit the right side of my spine, colliding with my ribs. Momentum had carried me farther, and I had rolled to the left and tumbled out of the bin and onto the asphalt. The sight of the plate to the east, beyond the alleyway, indicated to me that I was still alive. There were worse things in this life, I supposed. The drop into the bin might have killed me, had the garbage chute not curved and subsequently slowed my fall. Something crashed and banged down the chute after me. My diamond-back revolver bounced off the overturned rubbish bin and landed square on my chest, reminding me to breathe as daggers of pain shot through my body. God damn! A few wheezy breaths later, oxygen filled my lungs once more. I forced my aching body to roll away from the building, away from the shouts of the men rushing down to find me. I wished there was time to relax, to look up at the night sky and the cathartic sight of the stars. That was the only good thing about being in Jersey. "He's down there! Fucking get him!" The screams brought my mind back to the now and my right hand to my revolver. An automatic landed on the ground a stone's throw from me, its legs screeching from the impact of the 3-story jump. It was a little over 6 feet in height, with gangly arms stronger than a man's, a smooth humanoid body, and glowing red eyes that told me this wasn't a factory floor model. It was programmed to search and destroy. The automatic straightened and ran toward me. 2 pulls on my trigger made 2 fist-sized holes in the machine. Neural interface and servos fell out of its seared chassis. If these boys had one red eye, there was no doubt they had plenty more. I needed to get out of there. Fast. Even with my back in shambles, I found I could still walk. The passing cars didn't quite drown out the sound of leather soles ringing against iron walkways. The hunters were on the move. I headed away from the sounds, down the alley to a small side street. I hoped it would prove to be a straight shot to the main street, where I'd parked my car. I needed a speedy getaway. I turned the corner and pressed my back against the wall, inching my way to the corner of the building. I allowed my head to leave the safety of cover for just a moment to scan the street. My senses immediately exploded. A car screeching, men screaming, and a cacophony of gunfire as .45 caliber rounds skipped across the concrete. "There's the roach! Get him!" I opened the chamber. 4 rounds left, and only God knew how many targets. I closed it and readied myself, puffing out my chest to try to crack my back. That fall had really affected my breathing. No using garbage chutes anymore. "You're gonna pay for killing the boss, Roach! Your little lady is next!" They wouldn't expect me to start running across the road, I thought. They'd figure I would wait patiently for them to fill me with lead, perhaps. Switching the gun to my left hand and firing perpendicular to my path, I tried to lay down some covering fire for myself. The heated rounds were designed to kill automatic, so they were overkill for flesh and bone. The traitorous mobsters were spreading out on the street. I had little time to aim. 1 round took out a leg, 2 hit the screeching car behind them, and the final bullet cut through a Tommy gun into the assailant's chest. The others fired after me, unable to get a bead on me after I slipped into a nearby alley that ran between 2 apartment complexes. It was long enough to be a no-man's land between me and my pursuers. The job had called for only one corpse. The gunman didn't need to die too. But neither did I need them following me around after tonight. I cracked the cylinder open and dropped the empties onto the concrete as I slammed myself into the wall for cover. The scattering shells sounded like wind chimes, though it was hard to hear with my deafened ears. The extra bullets were in my left pocket. Thankfully, I hadn't landed on them during my fall. That would have hurt like hell. The Brunos' footsteps got louder as I fed each round into the revolver. They were advancing slowly, firing into the alley now and then to see where I was or maybe to intimidate me. But unlike them, I'd been in the war. Being surrounded by machine gun fire was my bread and butter. Looking back over to the street, through the buildings, I caught a glimpse of the upper city. Its brightness was blinding even from here. Rotor birds flew all around the mile-high buildings. The fluorescent and neon lights of the plate glimmered above in contrast to the pitch black of the lower city beneath. Jersey was a cesspit, but at least its sky hadn't been stolen. The only illumination in the alleyway came from a lamppost a few yards away from me, directly in front of the building I had my back to. I pushed myself up tighter to the wall, hoping my body would disappear into the darkness and give me some edge in this fight. The single yellow bulb lit the frosted street and splayed light against the wall opposite me, guiding my eyes to where the Brunos would be coming from. A gust of cold wind hit my face and bare arms. I'd left my jacket at home, or maybe in the car. I wasn't sure where I left things anymore, but adrenaline kept me warm. I carried my weapon in my right hand now, and I lifted it as I braced myself against the cool brick. All 7.38 rounds were ready to find places to park themselves. I pulled the hammer back, hearing the mechanisms inside switch. Just like a cowboy gun, single action, built for speed. The three Brunos were well equipped, but stupid and blinded by rage as they appeared at the mouth of the alleyway. Maybe they were expecting to see me running farther down the alley, making it easy for them. They caught a glimpse of my gleaming steel a moment too late. My finger was faster than their arms. Moments later, they were lying on the bloody street, and another 7 rounds were gone from my weapon. My head was rocking with the blasts, which had been amplified in the enclosed space. I walked up to the trio of corpses and reached down to grab the leader's Tommy gun. The M1929 was a good advancement on the classic design of the submachine gun. Unfortunately for these boys, weapons had no loyalty. The gunman who'd been spitting out insults earlier was at my feet now. He looked like any Mafia Bruno. Pale skin, thick beard, short hair, dark coat. His guts were spilling out, but he was still kicking. "You should be dead, asshole. You're a roach, a bug to her. She don't give a shit about you. You killed your best chance of getting out of this game. It's Roche, you fuck." I took the magazine out and used the last round to end his story with a period. Roche. The bastards were brave to be calling me that. I headed north to find my car. The sudden silence, calming and eerie, helped me to think as I walked. My burgundy Talbot was a bit scuffed up from the salt on the roads, but it still looked finer than any other car in this part of town. I opened the trunk, loaded my last 7 rounds into my revolver, and threw it inside. I'd felt my trigger finger taking over, and I wanted to leave it to cool for a while. I got in the car, letting my body melt into the leather upholstery. Laying my head against the steering wheel, I felt the adrenaline pouring out of me, the heat radiating off my face. Pain came soon after, from the pulsing lump on my forehead. I heard a faint knocking on the hood of my car. 2 knocks. Twice. I looked up, but there was no one there. Someone, however, had left me a gift in the form of a small envelope under the windshield wiper. It was unsealed, unsigned, and had some green sticking out of the flap. The street was well lit. but I didn't bother looking around for the boys who dropped it. I knew that I wouldn't see them. I reached out my open window and grasped the envelope tightly, then opened it to reveal a wad of cash. 3,000, as promised. "Damn, you're fast," I said, to no one in particular. The Iron Hands had faith in me. That was why she was willing to pay big rainy day funds like this, or maybe she just didn't mind paying extra to get traitors dealt with fast. Either way, job done. Money paid. Since I was in Jersey, I had a friend to visit. Plus, I had to get far away from the Heights, else it wouldn't be just the cops who would make my night hell. The Talbot was humming nicely as I rolled up to a small house on Palisade and parked near the front door. As I got out, I realized my back was still fucked from the fall into the garbage bin. I knocked, and seconds later, Patrick Sinclair cracked open the door, his brow furrowed. "Hell, you're late." "Had work to do. Scotch." Sinclair opened the door wide and let me in. A couple boys from work were already there, sitting at the kitchen table. Sinclair placed a glass in my hand. Before drinking the amber liquid, I pressed the cool glass against my cheek, feeling the sting from the knuckle I took to the face. I kept playing the scenes over and over in my head to convince myself I'd gotten the job done. Getting caught and dragged in, hiding my gun somewhere they wouldn't look, getting pulled up in front of the boss, taking a bit of a beating while they pulled teeth for information. Bruno on the left, Red Eye on the right. Breaking Bruno's arm, throwing the machine off balance, sending one bullet to the boss's head, getting out. The fire escape had been my first choice of exit, but because they'd been especially wary of me, I guess they'd recognized me, the garbage chute had to do. Boss killed, mess cleaned up, done deal. Still, I felt as if I was forgetting something. "Roche, you want a hand?" I lifted my eyes immediately at the mention of the insect. The blue eye at the table brought me back to the present. I should take a sip from the glass that was soothing my wound. "Deal me in." Every Sunday poker night was the same. I lost most of the pot, and I got it all back, if only just enough to make a buck or two. I sat with my glass of scotch and a dart in my right hand, 2 cards in my left, king and jack. To my left was Paddy Sinclair, still antsy, tapping the tops of the 2 cards stacked together in his hand. Reynolds, a desk sergeant with too much time on his hands and not enough balls, sat across the table from me, trying to decide whether to fold or to stay in. And to my right sat our automatic friend Tobias, Toby for short, the one blue eye I knew that could swear like a sailor. The metal man scanned the room and the cards with its blue bulbs, the lenses reflecting the light from the lamp hanging over us. Sinclair always had this wild look about him, though it was only in his eyes. Clean-shaven with side-parted hair, at first glance he looked like a pretty boy from one of those military posters. He'd served for long enough to earn that look, too. He had broad shoulders and a bit more beef than the average guy on the street. With his classic New York accent, he was the golden boy of the 5th Precinct and one of the few people I trusted there. I wished he'd stop wearing that damn polka-dot tie, though. He looked ridiculous. "I ever tell you guys what kind of case I handled on Friday night?" Sinclair always started a story when he had a bad hand, trying to get us to fold by acting confident. He thought he was clever, but I'd caught on. I couldn't say the same of the other 2 at the table, though. We all sighed and groaned. The automatic's white pupils rolled in its blue eyes, and the buzzing electrodes of its voice box emitted a flanged metallic voice. "Paddy, I couldn't care less about who you locked up. Play the goddamn game." "Well, you should care, because we got a blue eye who was running some shipments across the border. It thought it could hollow out its carapace and slide in some bottles, sneak 'em over to the lower city to Pennsylvania and make a quick buck. That metal man is one of the reasons the politicians are getting wary of you, Toby. Cute, asshole. You ain't looking so high and mighty with that in your hand. Toby pointed a metal finger to the snifter Sinclair held gingerly. He downed its contents and slid the glass under the table. Don't you be ragging on us, Blue Eyes, Toby continued. There's not many of us left who haven't been turned off to be your little lapdogs. Easy, man, easy. Simple jab is all. Besides, you can't catch me with this here alcohol. And why not? No evidence, no crime. Sinclair laughed, and I couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Exactly the logic the Blue Eye had when it got caught crossing from here to Penn. Except unlike me, it didn't have to try too hard to hide what it was carrying, seeing as the goods were already out of sight. But, stereotypes aside, no one trusts Blue Eyes these days. All right, get on with it. Toby looked at me with an expression I thought only humans could make in the face of something stupid. I stifled another chuckle. Glassware, fine dinner plates, a lot of clutter, mostly covered in silver and gold. It was posing as a shipment official for some tableware company near the docks. No idea where it got a story like that, since it was as far from a harbor as it's possible to be. Let me guess, Toby said. They didn't catch on that it had booze, no matter how many times they roped it back into a cell? Toby had fallen right into another of Sinclair's old tricks, getting caught up by the story. They hadn't a clue. It did this for months, until this Friday, that is, when it wasn't so lucky. It had passed through customs fine, but I got roped into automatic screening on the Washington that day. This automatic rolled in, and maybe it forgot to put extra padding in there to keep the bottles from knocking around, because when it kept clinking after it set its luggage down, we knew something was up. And what was the padding? I had to ask. Lord knew if the automatic was carrying something valuable, it would stuff as many illicit things alongside the booze as possible. I took a sip of scotch and put the glass to my cheek again. Silica beads and oil. The metalhead was running alcohol and cheap automatic fluid over the border. Sounds like something Toby might start doing soon, eh? Too bad I couldn't have gotten some of that before you locked him up. That shit's expensive. Toby rotated its arms, and a faint creaking sound could be heard. Then ask for some, man. You know I'm a good cop. Good to the law and to my friends. Sinclair pulled a sealed plastic bag from the inside of his jacket and threw it into the pot. The tiny white beads and thick viscous fluid inside the bag sloshed as it knocked over several piles of chips. If you can win it, that is. Any time, copper. Toby lifted its eyebrows in a sort of smirk, as its mouth wasn't capable of that expression, though it was quite adept at swallowing shot after shot. Reynolds spoke up. You up to anything, Roche? He was a bigger guy, not unfit, but he definitely enjoyed his chair at work. No receding hairline, though. Not yet, anyway. Any crazy stories from your night calls? You look a smidge worse for wear tonight. I did my best to keep the feeling of dizziness at bay as I tried to think of something. Night calls had been sparse recently, but they were always interesting. Things are slow in my line of work, mostly. A couple weeks ago I was hunting down a guy who'd been running an automatic prostitution ring for some hard cash. Hell, his excuse was, "It's the Depression. I'll get my money however I want." And how's that special in any way? Come on, when we were partners in 23, we busted at least a dozen a month, Sinclair piped up. He always loved hearing about the shit that the bigwigs from the Fifth put me through. The call girls were more human than automatic, though, back in those days. While I was running this op, I realized I had to get close to this guy without him noticing me in any way. I spent weeks tailing all his escorts and call girls, mapping out their positions until I found out which ones worked right out of his hideout. A few days later, I went in looking as legit as I could. What do you mean by legit? Toby asked. Legit as in looking as inconspicuous as I can in a whorehouse. I don't get it. I rolled my eyes. You had to spoon-feed information to these things. I wondered how they ever got work done without someone holding their hands. Sinclair began to laugh. "You telling us you pitched a robot?" I couldn't keep from grinning at that point. Yeah, I pitched a robot. Then afterward, while the metal bird was counting the change I gave it, I busted the guy in his office with my pants still around my ankles. You should have seen his face. The table erupted in laughter. Sinclair put his face in his hands, trying to catch his breath. I had to laugh at that, too. My face hurt from smiling. We had to take whatever joy we could get these days. Even Toby laughed, after having the joke spoon-fed to it, that is. After a while, we all died down, and the game was still standing motionless where we'd left it. Looking at the clock, I saw that it was tomorrow already. Sunday had turned to Monday, and my body was informing me that it was ready to go limp for a while after my little adventure. Shit, guys, I gotta roll. I got things to catch up on. I lifted myself from the chair as everyone shot out a sound of disappointment. "Come on, Roche. Another hand?" Sinclair complained. "Or another smut story?" "Can't. You know how it goes." "If only I did. I'd rather be doing what you do instead of pushing paperwork for scraps." He chuckled glumly. I nodded. He'd kill me if he knew how much I made these days, in this economy. I bid them goodbye as I left the kitchen and passed through the front door, which led to a yard covered in dying grass. The blades crunched and crackled under my shoes as I strolled past the open gate and over to my car. I started the engine, listening to it hiccup and sputter for a few moments before quieting itself. I stared out the window at the sleepless city as I began to drive. Jersey. Of all fucking places, Sinclair had to live in Jersey. Still, Union was a nice little town, and thankfully it was far enough away from the recent bloodbath. I drove eastward, heading toward the lower city and home. During the drive, I had another distant glimpse of the plate. I lost sight of the towering monstrosity for some time while passing through the Lincoln Tunnel, but it was much closer once I reached the other end. I had to admit that the plate was looking lovely this morning. A floating steel slab that held an entire city above our heads, mocking us silently, though the red and blue flickering lights along its support catwalks did look like stars twinkling in the darkness. Everything in the lower city revolved around that damn piece of metal. Billboards, skyscrapers, jobs, everything. But at least the plate relied on us for support. The entire slab rested on several control points built out of taller buildings, including GE, the Empire, and even my own apartment building. But the plate wasn't enough to distract me from the filth of the lower city. People there were robbed of hope, robbed of sunlight, living in eternal darkness. The prostitutes didn't work specific hours, and mob killings weren't saved for the dead of night. Hell, even when the city lights went on at 6 in the morning, it still seemed damn dark. Nothing was as it should be down here. And because the sun was blocked from us 22 hours of the day, we got sunrise and sunset. We never really woke up from this enduring nightmare. We hadn't woken up since the plate had been built. The alcohol made me feel as if I were floating, and everything that had happened last night was coming through in flashes of lucidity. The only reason I didn't crash my car into a building was because my muscle memory helped me hit the brakes just in time. My legs somehow pulled the rest of me out onto the sidewalk, and I stumbled past an empty street meat cart toward my building. I rode the elevator up to my floor and arrived in my apartment shortly afterward. I didn't remember opening my door or locking it, for that matter. Hot flashes. My mind was starting to go. I hadn't had that much to drink, had I? Last time I'd counted, I'd had a couple glasses of scotch. Or were they bottles? In my stupor and exhaustion, my body seemed to think the floor would be more comfortable than the couch, and I didn't have much power to protest as I collapsed. Not even the ringing phone stopped me. The ringing in my head was overwhelmed by the ringing of my rotary phone. It shook with aggression on the glass and oak table in the center of the room, claiming my attention before my own pain did. Had it been ringing all morning? I felt drool running from my cheek and onto the floor. I dragged myself to my feet, stumbling slightly, and grabbed at the table to steady myself. I lifted the receiver off the base of the phone. There was some static as the switchboard operator plugged in a jack on the control board. A distorted voice finally came through. "I'd like to make a night call." Chapter 2. I said I'd like to make a night call. The voice sounded professional and hard, even through the rusty technology. Familiar, too. Probably Robbins or Sinclair. And impatient. I must have blanked for a moment. My brain finally comprehended the words that had come through the speaker as I responded with a cough. I looked at the calendar to see what day it was. I'd been losing sleep lately. Late nights pounding back bottles had distracted my eyes from the calendar long enough for confusion to set in. From the rough black streaks on the wall calendar, I gathered that it was Monday. The clock beside it said 7 o'clock. 7 at night. Where? Prince and Green. 20 minutes. It was a short drive away, but I needed that time to sober up, or perhaps bleed the hangover out of my body. I threw on my holster and straightened my outfit, trying to make myself somewhat professional. My holster was pretty light, and I realized I had left my weapon somewhere. Again. Hopefully I hadn't put it in the pot last night. It was probably in my trunk. I'd get it later, when I needed it. If I needed it. I stepped out into the hallway. Its condition seemed to grow worse by the day. My own apartment could use some cleaning too, but it was nowhere near as bad as the neglected halls of this building. As with all the other buildings that were control points for the plate, everyone took great care to make the office space inside look respectable, as if it belonged in the upper city. The residential area, however, was another story. I walked down the hall and waited a few moments for an elevator. When the doors parted, the carriage was already occupied. A green eye was standing inside, eyeing me and speaking in its whirs and buzzes. My hangover distorted every word. Hell, it barely had a brain. It was probably talking about the weather. Not that the weather ever changed in the lower city. A few minutes later, the rusted doors peeled back and we walked out. The machine left through the revolving doors and joined the swarming sea of humans and automatics running from or to their jobs. The metalheads were everywhere. Nearly half the foot traffic in this damn city was now machines. The metal men's rusted parts and peeling paint made for a terrible image. The blue eyes weren't bad, most of them anyway, but the damn green eyes gave me the willies. Maybe the blue eyes were a bit more tolerable because they could think for themselves, but, like Toby had said, there weren't many left after Second Prohibition, when the law had required all blue eyes not employed by General Electrics to be made green, for safety. It was more a sea of green than a sea of chrome. I stepped out into Chinatown. At least that was what they'd used to call the area. Nowadays it was called Manhattan's Anchor, because people didn't want to be referring to our main rival in the automatics industry. Nor did the higher-ups want common folk complaining that the Chinese had once had a firm foothold on American soil. I bought a newspaper and a hot dog just in front of the building. Yuri still made the best dogs in the city and always gave me a discount on my nightly refuels at his stand. He was a shortish man, a bit chubby in the cheeks, his weight having suffered from eating his own merchandise. No doubt it was all he could afford. A privyet and a paka later, I was walking along the crowded street once more. The newspaper was far less comforting than the street meat, and full of the same shit. Politics, plate expansion, threats from China, robotic advancements, crashing stocks. Today, there was also a short piece about a Mafia gunfight in the Heights the previous night, with 5 dead gunmen and no suspects. Nothing unusual.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?